Get yourself out of our, get yourself out of this. No, you know what, whatever you're selling.
Engineer, Ryan.
He's not checked out of this
Do you have
model chair though.
instructions if you'd like?
Oh, we have
my
printed
God.
instructions, yeah.
Okay, there's already, I want to know, there's already too many people in here for a study session. Just saying. What? I can't hear you.
Figure it out. It's not-
Okay,
seat angle adjustment, number 2. It's the second thing.
These are my favorite problems that I make.
okay, let's get ourselves going.
Seat angle
Um,
adjustment. You want the back or the bottom?
Oh. We may need non-IT technical assistance for Nancy's chair.
Are there any engineers in the room?
Are there- Well, there's at least one engineer that we could call out.
I'll be
but-
fine.
There's another, take a chair. On this.
I'm fine.
Okay, we're good. So we're good. We're going to try and start. Okay, let's get ourselves started, I think. This is a study session. This is the City of Ellensburg's study session for the evening of Monday, October 18th. I will note that we have 2 items on this agenda. The American Rescue Plan Act. This is just an overview of the recovery funds and potential investments of those funds. And then also we'll do continue the conversation for the proposed land development code amendments. During the study session, we'll try and break at 6:50 so people can stretch before we start our regular council meeting at 7 o'clock. I do want to just note, if anybody's streaming this, that we are not accepting public comment during study session. And that these items, if you do have comment, ultimately will come back in front of council in an arena where public comment would be welcome. With that, let's start then with the number 1 on our agenda. There was a handout that just came around also for this item. So this is the America Rescue Plan Act funds.
Excellent. Good evening, Council. Heidi Barron-Cernaway, your city manager. This is a discussion, as you can see, we have a number of staff both in the room and joining us remotely to weigh in on this item if you have questions. So this is the American Rescue Plan Act and Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, Clipper and ARPA, we've been calling them. Overview and just a funding discussion. Just a kind of quick background. So the dollars were actually assigned, really the federal government approved those in March of 2021 with a very narrow set of available uses, eligible uses. And so if you recall, the CARES Act funding dollars were really to come to communities and get distributed out into the communities. These have a much narrower set of expense opportunities. So some of the eligible uses have to be COVID related. They're really about COVID recovery. They called out very specific public health expenditures, addressing negative impacts caused by the public health emergency, replacing lost revenue, and providing premium pay for essential workers, and then called out very specifically water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure projects. So guidance has actually been forthcoming since March, and I think we finally have the last set of guidance just recently produced from the U.S. Department of Treasury. Locally, the Office of Financial Management in Washington State is managing the dollars. Ellensburg is set to actually be distributed 5.9 million. It's a little higher than we expected. There were a number of smaller cities that didn't take their allotment, and so they came back for redistribution. So we're pretty confident with this number moving forward. The goal is to actually have the funds obligated by the end of 2024 and to have them spent by the end of 2026. And so there's a little bit of time available to spend these funds. We've been meeting internally over the last couple of months talking about where are our losses in our community. And so that's why you have a number of staff from across departments here. We've been taking a close look at what can we spend these on, what are they authorized for, where have we seen losses, and what kinds of recommendations can we move forth to council to make the biggest impact here. So we really considered council priorities. Some of the discussion from your retreat was moved into this discussion, what's important, and wanted to make sure that we could choose projects and programs that we thought were ready, and ones that didn't have alternative funding sources, things that again might have the biggest impact. We wanted to consider reporting requirements because these are federal dollars. They come with lots of strings and sometimes ropes. Also, there's a revenue loss component and trying to look at sectors that were impacted. And we know that the creative tourism and service sector, our small businesses were impacted through COVID. And then looking at our city loss calculation, there's a very specific requirement that our finance folks have determined. So there's an area of funding that we have a little bit of opportunity to point toward toward opportunities, and you'll see kind of where we're looking for those. And then we wanted to make sure these are one-time revenues, and so marrying those with one-time expenses. So our recommendation from staff really ultimately ended up kind of 2 points. One was to make the city whole. And so there are some specific funding obligations that we have. So we have self-insured employee, an employee group with our non-represented employees. There are very specific direct COVID costs for testing and treatment and care from this employee group to the tune at this point of $650,000. Very much an eligible expense. It would have long-term impact if we didn't replace those funds to both the cities and the employees' costs for premiums for a very long time. So our recommendation is to absolutely fund those as an absolutely direct connected cost to COVID. Secondly, really the principle is to invest in our future. And that's where we get into kind of an array of projects. The first project recommendation, and we've reserved $1.8 million for this, and is really to do the construction design, finish the design and construction of Unity Park. We think about the impacts of COVID and where we can make a potential impact. Thinking about creating a space where people can gather after a couple of years of people physically distancing. And so an opportunity that we don't have other funding aligned, and to make it an incredibly big impact in our downtown and investment. The second item would be to actually staff up to manage both grant and projects so we can actually get those projects done. We want to make sure we have enough capacity to deliver on anything we recommend. And so we certainly need that. Our staff are kind of at capacity, and making sure we bring on the expertise in order to perform. So a 3-year term limited position to do project and grant management. And the third in this category is really, we've had a number of discussions about Gateway, and I'm not talking about the stormwater projects for university. I'm talking about our entrances from both Canyon and University, or from the roundabouts off the freeway. A lot of folks, we understand, they see Ellensburg and it's like it's McDonald's and a gas station. They don't make it into our downtown. Tourism is an incredibly important part of our economy, and really helping drive people from the exits to the downtown are wonderful. And Councilmember Lilquist asked me, she said she'd believe me if she saw it. So I have an example I'll pass around, and I have more of these if you'd like. I use an example of Sheridan, Wyoming. Sheridan, the downtown, is a historic downtown, and it's a beautiful little area. And I saw lots of similarities to Ellensburg. And when you drive off, the downtown is located a little over a mile from the freeway exit. And when you come off the freeway exit, you see this big, beautiful sign, and you know there's something really cool ahead. I mean, it doesn't have to say, there's really cool things ahead. The sign itself says that, and it has a huge presence. And so I'll pass a photo of that around. So it's to that scale that, most people, if they're looking for things, they're using their phones to find them. But if you're not looking for something, it's the wow factor, and maybe making some investments in that area. And so that's one recommendation too for this pot of money. Again, where can we make the biggest investment in the future? The final item is really making a recommendation for funding a sewer project, the Anderson Road Sewer Extension. We considered a number of other projects, both in water and sewer. This one was the right price. The total cost is 2.8. I had to scale down just to redistribute my dollars to make sure these were appropriate. But water fund is actually has a fair fund balance, and we have some big investments coming up in that, but it actually is a little more, it's got a little more to use. And so our sewer funds, as we look forward into, right now, they're working on redesign of our sewer treatment plant or some of the aeration. And that's probably going to be in the $14+ million. And that's, we don't have a plan for funding for that. So anything that we can help with the sewer, we thought it's not very exciting. It might not be very exciting, but it's a project that's really easy to federalize and actually complete. And the timing is perfect on this as well. So that's really the recommendation for the full 5.9 million. We did consider other projects, and we have some backup projects if we need to, and there are certainly some other opportunities. So this is really a discussion for council. What we would do is take the funding recommendation and really start programming that into our upcoming budgets. And so if there's additional information you would like, right now we're just looking for direction and moving forward, but that would be staff's recommendation. And I guess at that, I'd open it up to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Council questions?
Yeah. So it occurred to me as you were speaking, we have considered in the past visitor information center to be located out on Canyon Road, closer to the interchange. And I guess would recommend that it looks like you have a gateway committee put together to consider signs or whatever. But if they came back to us with, we really think this visitor information center out at the interchange would work better, I'd entertain that.
So we would just need to be careful with the eligible expenses. And so if they're generally capital expenses, they're much easier to do. But I think that's really, we're sort of pulling together a number of pieces of information. And I think there's definitely flexibility. And I think it's really important to bring together folks from across sectors in our community, including the Arts Commission, and including all of our downtown association and economic development folks too. So yeah, I'm sure there's room in which direction those funds would go.
Other questions?
I had a question on the fund, the obligated date by the end of 2024 and completed by 26. When would the funds become available? Do we have an estimate on that?
So we've actually received the first installment. It's just under half.
Okay.
And so they tried to get the cash out immediately. And what we wanted to do is make sure we had the direction for how to use these dollars. And like other communities, we're looking at how can we make the biggest impact. And so having that council discussion about priorities was really important to us. And then making sure we got the guidelines from OFM and from Treasury.
And the second distribution, assuming it's
The second
the other half?
distribution, Jerica, do you know, or to keep before next
Okay.
summer?
So just what is the next step? And are we just kind of saying yes in a general way move forward with this, or are we voting? We're not voting
Can't
anything
vote.
tonight.
Yeah, we wouldn't recommend the action, certainly. So these would come back to you in a budget process. And so if there's specific direction you wanted to go or more research you wanted us to do, more information you needed, just providing some direction for staff at this point.
Other questions?
A lot of questions. I like staff recommendations. I don't know how long it takes to build a park. I'm assuming that would get done by 2026. Dear God, I hope. Yeah, so I think this is great. Is there enough? I know there are enough grants that flow through. There's enough work for a full-time grant project manager for the city, just for the entity of the city, or is that a shared service that you'll have with the boards and commissions, centrifuges? What are your thoughts there?
So with this specific position, we want somebody that doesn't just manage grants, but also really does projects, construction projects, capital projects. And so if there are additional infrastructure dollars coming available, and I know there's a number of grants that are still out there, making sure that we have the staff. So likely this person could work across a different cross-section of grants in order to perform. A lot of those, again, are capital projects, and it really adds capacity to what we can deliver.
So just to clarify that position too, the other, I mean, it clearly is coming out of the ARPA funds, but there's at least 2 packages in Washington that could significantly, that if we are not well positioned, we would have challenges in accessing resources that can we talk, maybe speak to that just a bit.
So yes, we understand there are infrastructure packages out and specific call outs for projects here in this community. And again, the infrastructure is, the water, sewer, and broadband. So we think, again, if this started out as again, the dollars in one grant have to be spent for the grant they're working on. So we could potentially share this cost, so it might not be this high if we were to spread out the cost among other projects. So I do think, and that's the vision for this, that we create capacity. We also, I will tell you, even if the additional federal dollars don't come through, we have staff who are really amazing at getting grants and getting matches. And we just end up not being able to do more because we run against capacity challenges. And so I believe this will be a really good investment for our community, not just for this grant to perform, but for others as well.
So just clarification to get on the position. So as a project manager, that individual can manage projects which benefit the community, not specific to the ARPA funds.
But
Go ahead.
not right grants. It's not a person to go get grants.
It's
person
not
to
just
manage
a
the
person to
grants.
go get grants. They
Just-
might do some grant writing too for us.
I had a question on the Anderson Road project. You said you pared the project from 2.8 million down to 2.65. Are we backfilling that, or is that, I'm just curious if we're going to come up, sort of part the way there and come up with funds from another source?
Yeah, it would just come out of the sewer department funding.
Mhm. Okay.
Just
So-
help- Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So 2022 construction, is the design complete, or is that?
It's nearly complete. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
So Ryan, just if you would, so that, just so I'm clear on what we're doing, I'm forgetting now, we have annexed in that area, or we
I think a
haven't?
portion of that area, but there's a sewer that dead ends on Tandem Road at Wilson Creek there. Go the west to Anderson Road and all the way up Anderson Road to the First Avenue lift station. That's one of the huge benefits of this project. There's a pump station there that would go away.
Another follow-up question on that, on the design that's nearly complete. How's that been funded up to this point? Or has the design been
It's
funded?
been funded out of the sewer department revenues,
And what
and it was budgeted for.
percentage of the 2.8 million is that likely to be? I mean, how much of the 2.8 million cost has already been covered, so to speak, by another fund? I understand. The 2.8 is not.
That's for construction. The
That's
design
just
is already
construction,
paid
not
for. Yeah,
design.
it's in the process of being paid for, and it's almost done. So yeah,
So-
this is all construction money.
Okay, so all the new work is construction, the design's been covered, basically. Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? One other one, just on Union Park, Pearl Street. I thought we had identified money for a consultant to move forward with the exploration of the Pearl Street Promenade.
Right. Yes, we have a consultant working on a very timely contract, and we're hoping to have the deliverable by the end of November in the Pearl Street Promenade. And so there'll be additional discussions coming forward on how to and whether to move that forward. There are a bunch of different models, be they, sort of a full-time transition, full-time, maybe it's a seasonal transition, maybe it's event specific only, or maybe it's certain times of the day. So it's really opened our eyes in the process of early discussions.
Great, thanks. I think to Kristen's eye roll, as that comes back through the funding here and the consultant work on Pearl Street Promenade, it would be helpful to have a timeline that once we determine through the conversation the whether or how to, well, if we determine we are, then I think council would be interested generally in broad understanding the broad timelines for completion of the park and the promenade. Because I think it's still very unclear, at least to me.
Absolutely. You're gonna schedule the grand opening now.
I would, yeah, and I'd like to see it in April. Thank you.
Work, right, Brad?
I had a question related to the promenade design and our ongoing discussions about how to deal with streeteries. Is it likely that these two will intersect and be addressed? I realize that we have streeteries outside this particular street, but we also have the largest streetery in town on this particular street. So I would assume that it needs to be factored in or out of any promenade plan. Is that more
Yes,
close to accurate?
definitely.
So does that mean that we cannot make a decision on streeteries until we get through this process?
No, I don't believe so at all. No, part of the holdup on the pause on the streeters coming back to you, we delayed it by a month, was that we were planning on doing some public outreach for streeteries, and then the discussion of the promenade came up. So we decided to pair some of any public outreach. So we're not asking different questions to the same set of people, within a month's period of time. So they are absolutely, they don't need to come through together, although one may impact another, and really, looking at what the value of, using right away for private business, making sure we have a good, clear discussion about the impacts.
And then just for clarification, the streeteries come back to us at a.
We have that scheduled for the
Yeah.
second meeting in November, the study session.
Okay, great. Is there anything else? Any comments? So what I'm sensing, since we're not taking action, is general consensus. Mary, are you good? General consensus with the direction in which you're going. And so however we need to come back to whether resolution or just through the budget process. I think you've got that
Excellent.
recognition at this point. And if there are further questions, clearly that can occur during the budget process and going forward.
And this wasn't a me only thing. We had a wonderful team. And so I just want to thank the team of
Well,
staff.
and
that have
actually,
been
is
working
there,
on this.
because we do have, I know Brad's on and Ryan's here, Jerica. Is there anything that staff would like to add to the conversation? No.
No, I'm good. I think city manager did a good job of covering it. I think from a timeline perspective, with the park, we're going to start the final master planning phase here in mid-November. We have a couple of windows of opportunity to develop the park if funding is available, kind of before and after the festival season. So there's really no reason why we have to wait very long for the development of that park. I could see it happening potentially very soon.
Great. Thank you. Okay, with that, then let's move on to the second item on our study session. That's to continue the conversation on the land development code. And I think we were lost in tables.
Yes, thank you.
Kirsten be lost in tables.
Kirsten Sackett, Community Development Director. And yeah, we're going to kind of start where we left off, but to try to make the most of our time, I do want to just follow up on some of the discussion items, a couple of questions that you guys had at last study session. Review the setback and intensity chart, and then head back to the land use charts. There were some questions surrounding that, but I was hoping to answer some of the other questions first. So there were a couple of questions that arose regarding a couple of definitions. Okay. Sure it was ready, but I want to share a screen really quickly. There was a question about light manufacturing, and we did come up with some other ideas for what falls into that category. And it includes things like apparel, clothing accessories, home accessories, drapes,
bedspreads. These are things that you can make on site. Artificial plants, food, jewelry, instruments, computers, electronic devices, and bookbinding. And so that's the kind of use that would fall into what you'd be making in the light manufacturing category that we had wanted to add as a potential use besides light industry. So I had said that I would come back with that information. And so I just want to make sure those.
So when I read that, all was an interesting word. All processing. I'm not. I mean, I don't want to, but
So whatever it takes to make that item, it all occurs in that one place.
right, I understand.
Yeah.
So the model in various ways is often the subcontract. I mean, perhaps it. How do we define all? I guess is my question.
You know, I think in a lot of times there's going to be parts that are brought to you already partially made that you then use. So it's like if you're going to be making an instrument there, everything to do with making the instrument you do there on site. So but then the point would be that you'd also have a retail component to it. So
So, excuse me, if what, so you're saying it's permitted, light manufacturing is automatically permitted pretty much in everything from CH on? Or no, we don't have CH anymore, so I guess it'd be CC.
We have CH, we don't have CC.
All right. And it will have a retail, it could have a retail component to it, or it can't have a retail component.
it may, it doesn't have to, but it allows that.
What do you do
opportunity.
then about all the people who are doing these kinds of things in their garages and their basements and their,
Well, if it's a
extra
home
room?
if it's a home occupation and it's been permitted, then they go through a special process through our department. If it's something that we don't know about at all, we don't know about it. So this is more of a manufacturing scale than what you might make in your house, like that you sell on Etsy, and it's just a little bit here and there. That's where home occupation permit might fall into place.
I mean, that was the intent when we did that, right,
Mhm.
was that somebody could start a small business that required assembly processing, shipping in and shipping out of their garage, for instance.
Yeah, I think it's really about scale as
Yeah.
you start to get bigger and want to be able to do that and have the retail component on site. So, something to think about. You don't have to like decide for sure right now because I do want to just be able to share some other things today too. It also asked about the automobile fueling storage and whether or not the battery charging stations fell into that. Terry pointed me to the RCW here that states that basically any jurisdictions planning under this chapter must allow battery charging stations as a use in all areas except those zoned for residential or resource use or critical areas. So we could just add another row to the chart and make it specific to that use. It's not exactly the same as a normal gas station, and then just leave out all the residential zones and just be really specific about it. If that works. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of head nodding, so that's great. The next thing I wanted to do, we didn't even get to this part yet, and it's going to all come together a little bit. We're going to save the land use charts for after we do this part. But I wanted to go, in fact, let me stop sharing for a sec. I don't want everyone to like get dizzy while I scroll. Okay, well, it's for you guys, not online. Wanted to go to what we're doing with the, or proposing to do with the setback charts. As I've described before, we're proposing to add a couple new mixed-use zoning districts.
page?
This is on page 27 is where it begins of the actual ordinance. And then to sharing screen. Okay. So previously we had two charts. We had one for residential and we had one for non-residential. And what we're proposing now is to have three charts. that will be solely residential, one that will be commercial, industrial, and public reserve, and one that will be mixed use. So some of this is really basic and I'll talk through it real quick, but then there's some substantive things I wanted to point out to you, and Jamie's going to help out too. He's on the call too. So in the residential zone, we're proposing to just remove residential office from that chart and put it into the mixed use one. So it's just being deleted here in this column here. In this commercial, industrial, and public reserve zone, we're completely removing commercial tourist in the event that we do eliminate that zoning district altogether, and we're moving CC and CC2 to the mixed use zoning chart. So this is where I want to really talk through what some potential changes are. So everything in this chart is underlined because it's either brand new or we moved it to a new area. Everything in the RO residential office is the same. CC and CC2 are the same with 2 exceptions. And then we have the new mixed use zones. Now, the big difference that I wanted to talk about here is regarding the heights. And so I had Jamie pull up some information to share with you to help you have an understanding of what the different heights really speak to. I'll talk about what they currently are and then what we're proposing. But Jamie, do you have any of that information ready to share?
Sure. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah, if I could share my screen real quick.
Just the idea of just giving you some scale and understanding how many feet in terms of like a counter at the interchanges. And Jamie,
Yeah, sorry. Well, I can talk through it. I don't need to, I wanted to share.
he had pictures we took today.
I have pictures, but just for reference, everybody's fairly familiar with it. It was kind of a highlight building that we like to refer to a lot just because it's centrally located in our downtown on 5th and Water. The Patricia Place apartments, mainly just to get a scale for height. Those are really good to refer to just because of the different bands of color that were used in that building. And Patricia Place Center is a 3-story apartment building, but they're a little bit taller floors. Plus it has the parking garage underneath it. And you're at about 45 feet in height from the street level to the top of the building. And then Patricia Place Center is the 4-story building, but you don't really change much in height, but you do go to closer to 50 feet with that particular structure. And he uses the same, that one doesn't have the striped bands, it's all one color. But just for height, because within our height table that we're proposing, there's some 60-foot heights with some caveats in there. And to get a sense of scale, the tallest building that we have in Ellensburg is probably the Science 2 building up on campus. And that's roughly, it's 5 stories if you count the observatory deck. And that is right at about the 60-foot level. So.
Thank you, Jamie. So we have a 45 feet CC2 zones. And I just wanted to give you an example. I think this was helpful at the last meeting. A few years ago, we had a proposal for this property right here. This is University and Pearl Street. You have the grocery store right here. There's some homes along here. We got a proposal to put a mixed use type building that would have retail on the bottom and then 4 stories of apartment above, but it exceeded the height of 45 feet. And so what we ended up doing, and let me show it to you real quick. This is not the same direction. So University's over here and Pearl's here, and then it's kind of massive looking in scale. But on the bottom floor, you can see here, that was going to be retail and then 4 stories. So it was a 5-story building. And we said, you have to go get a height variance to seek this. But in order to do the height variance, they had to first do the SEPA And we checked on all the legal procedures, what was the correct order of what you needed to do. And they backed off because they really just didn't want to have to do SEPA prior to knowing if they could get the variance. And that's just one example. We've had, let me just shut that down. We've had other people ask us if they could go higher, and they're always told they have to do the variance. So there was a lot of discussion with the Planning Commission over the years with all of these charts. And what we had was 45 feet in the CC zone, and the idea of 60 feet would allow for a 5-story building. In the CC2 zone, it had been 75 feet, and so the proposal is to reduce that, and then also have the same in the 2 mixed-use zoning districts. However, as Jamie said, there's a couple of caveats. So the Planning Commission was really concerned with having too much scale right next to the downtown core. So, and this is up for discussion by all means. It states that where the subject property shares any portion of a border with the residential zone or lies within 700 feet of the boundaries of the downtown historic district, the maximum building height is 45 feet. And then also number 11 here states the maximum building height in the downtown historic district is 45 feet, with the idea of like you could scale up. They didn't want to impact the downtown neighborhood too much. But then as you get, and 700 feet is about 2.5 blocks. We measured that. Each block's about 300 or so, maybe. Yeah, that's good. We just use the tool on the GIS. So that was kind of the way of handling that. There's really no other changes to this chart, but this is something to give you your first opportunity to weigh in on that. And I don't know if you have feedback tonight or want to think about it. When we did this was like 2018 to 2019. That was before we did those surveys. It was really clear when we did the visual preference survey for the housing action plan that folks really didn't want to go up to 7 feet. 6 feet was questionable. It was just to kind of get a gauge. There's definitely going to be more surveys in the future, but this is where we had landed a couple of years ago. I think Nancy might have been on our liaison at the time. Are there any thoughts, general feedback right now?
I like the idea of protecting the historic buildings from having really tall buildings right next to them. Sounds like a good compromise. The CC zone extends past the historic district on University and Ellensburg. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is University. So the dark blue is CC zone, so University, and the light blue is CC2, and then I will pull up the boundaries of the historic district. The one thing that I think we need to clarify is whether it's the national district or the local district. So the national one is this in black with the hatch marks. The red is our local historic district, which is a much broader expansion. So that's something that we hadn't actually looked at when we drafted this up. So this is the downtown one, and then this is the residential one. That's the First Railroad edition.
Can I ask if the Landmarks and Design Commission has weighed in on this?
No, not the section, but we can, sure.
I would like their opinion on
Yeah, absolutely.
the height and on whether to use the local or national,
What was that last part?
and whether to use the local or national.
Oh, okay,
district.
yeah.
So if you build a building, say you built that 5-story building with the mixed use. So businesses downstairs and apartments upstairs. Does that, because that's, I'm confused on the elevator requirement. Does that require an elevator to get to those 4 stories?
When it's 5 stories, you do need to do that. That's why a lot of the developers choose the 4-story. As long as you have ADA accessibility on the bottom floor and you meet all those requirements, you don't then have to have an elevator. Some will choose to. I believe Patricia Place, the first one, has one by choice. And then the others, there was ways to meet code requirements without the elevator. But once you hit 5, you need to.
So, but if we chose as a city to say, you have to put elevators in on anything over 2 stories, we could.
I'm not certain about that.
Governed by the building code, which we've adopted state building code, so.
So we can't modify that at all.
Well, we could be more prescriptive in some instances, but I'm not sure with elevators.
Then my-
It's scale of cost too, you know, does it fund the project? Does it make it kind of break the project to have an elevator and it's just a 2-story?
Then my next question goes to, I'm funny, I don't care so much about height of building. I think people have a really hard time with visual height. They don't know what it really is. It's really hard because we live in a city where everything's short. But I don't have so much problem with the visual height. What I have a problem with is when it's near something and all of a sudden you end up with a huge building that blocks all the light. And so I guess from my standpoint, looking at it, I'm not so concerned with saying, oh, you can only build it 45 feet tall. Because a 45-foot building can cut off all the light too, quite effectively.
Yeah, versus a 60-foot kind of.
Versus the
Same.
60-foot. I mean, you're only talking 15 feet. It's probably not going to make that much difference if there's a building next door on the wrong side or in the wrong location. If the building is built on the south side and you happen to be in the building north of it, I mean, I've been talking to people on the west side quite a bit, and they're saying, we've just lost all our light because they built this huge condominium next door to our house. And now we're in the dark.
Yeah, no, it's a real thing that comes up. So I wonder what that means for all of you in terms of this stuff.
Right, I'm not sure that setting 45 feet or 60 feet or 75 feet is the solution so much as does it fit in the character of where it's going. I'd rather see some flexibility because quite honestly, the one that was proposed, the 5-story building, I'm not sure I would have objected to that there. Even though it was tall.
It's rather large. It does have a lot of room on the backside fronting the alley. Yeah, I mean, they're all different. Each side is unique. I will say though, just so you know that I measured and it would have been too close. That site would have been too close if you need the 700 feet from the district. Just throwing that out there.
So you have to be 700 feet with anything.
That's what the planning commission had come up with. And that's where you could have a discussion on maybe, you know, just maybe one block in between. You could change that.
Well, yeah, and I would go back to Nancy's observation. I think this one really needs landmarks and design to weigh in. I mean, that's clearly their role.
Just in the CC zone, I guess.
Well, but where the district might lie, and then I think recommendations on that gradation,
Yes.
you know, how to,
Yeah, I would say that they should be looking at the, I mean, it's complicated, but if a parcel abuts either directly or across the street or across the alley, an adjacent residential zone, maybe there needs to be a buffer. In other words, within that particular CC2 or CC zone, you know, if a parcel is directly abutting an adjacent lower density use, maybe you don't get to 60 or 45 feet as a way to stagger that. I don't know, just something I think we ought to consider.
let's try and, so I think this is really informational and for conversation. We're at 6:45. I don't think we've gotten to the tables yet, but I
No,
could be
we can
wrong.
go straight to there and I
No, I
realize.
don't, I'm
I would
just
say we
saying,
could-
are there more? Well, no, I mean, this is measured. If we need to come back to this, we need to come back to this. The problem with the land development code is that it's the land development code.
It's all just jumping you around over.
Just
We can
saying.
Certainly
Um,
come back on this.
I
one
was
after we go to
able to
landmarks.
have a haircut before we started the review of the last time
Uh,
of the land development code. No, I made that up. But so do you want to, did you want to continue through with what you wanted? Because I think you were sort of reviewing.
Yeah, I pointed this out in the memo. I can show, point a couple of things that we made changes to, and then recognize that there's a topic we need to come back to and spend more time on. But I pointed out in the memo that we've made a few changes in the residential one that you guys are comfortable with, the bed and breakfast being allowed in the 2 mixed use zones. Generally okay with
So
those changes. And then we did make the changes to the museum. We'll come back to that one in a second, to where we eliminated that condition for museums, the small scale ones right here. And it's just a conditional use permit. We previously had the size requirement and a conditional use permit. Now it's just a conditional use permit. And so you can start the conversation today, or you can come back to it, but the one we need to spend more time on is the super scale retail over 60,000.
And we don't have time for
Yeah.
that, but I do have an observation on the museums.
Okay.
In thinking about that, I wouldn't necessarily want to see someone build a brand new building that was to be beyond the 2,000 square foot that you had previously. So maybe keep that size, except when it is a historic building or could be eligible for the National Historic Register or something to that effect. Just to, we're not building.
Yeah.
Ginormous.
2,000 square
buildings.
foot for like a brand new one
Well,
versus
whatever
an
you had
existing.
Have you changed the
difference between
the
new
footnote 12 on your?
I had deleted it
Oh, okay,
altogether, but we
okay.
could change that footnote. right there.
Was 2,000 square
2,000.
foot or less.
And we could change that if the rest of the council is comfortable with saying, we don't want a brand new building larger than that, but if it's converting an existing.
I think that was the theme. We were trying to anticipate the possibility of some larger
Yeah, you don't
structures
want to
being
put build like
converted
a 3,000
rather than being
square
torn down, as an example. Yeah.
We can work on that wording for sure. Yeah.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Well, I don't want to take us back to the height discussion, but I do have a question.
Well, it's better to do it now.
If you put a height on downtown or on the buildings, at like 45 feet, if we, as a city, decided we want to put solar panels on those buildings, do they have to fall within that 45 feet?
No, we have some caveats in there, like appurtenant structures and things on the top of the building.
Okay.
Don't count against it.
So I just, and I apologize because I missed part of it. Maybe you covered it. Under the new zonings, the neighborhood and regional mixed use. But yeah, regional center. So where is that envisioned? Is that as an overlay or is that?
No, it's not an overlay. It would be proposed for, let's see. We had set up the future land use designation. Let's speak. Future land use designations to accommodate for that in the future. And basically this in blue, this dark blue,
Yeah.
is community mixed use. So you could potentially make it available, but you'd actually need to go through the process of the rezoning. And
Yeah.
I'd have to go down to the map and we could
No,
do
it's
that.
fine. Well, the question that I had was that the only residential, if I'm reading the table correctly, the only residential that I see permitted are townhouse, multifamily, and dwelling, live, work. I'm not even sure what that means. Well, there's an asterisk that I didn't follow. But so cottage communities are not allowed, duplexes are not allowed. And I wasn't clear when I was going through that, why those residential uses would have dropped out when the first A in both of the new creations are promoting neighborhood identity, then the range of commercial retail or whatever. So it seemed to me, I mean, we're back to Euclidean versus form-based. Almost, it's like, why are we being prescriptive?
And that's definitely open for conversation too.
So I just would throw that out there. I mean, that was surprising to me, because if we're looking at true mixed use in a somewhat urban kind of thing, it's a mix. And if we whack out, and cottage communities, though we screwed them up, are recognized as a means to get to affordable housing.
So, yeah, we only covered it briefly at the last meeting, but it was something that the planning commission, like I said, worked on before we delved into the housing action plan. I think they really felt like single family was not the best and highest use, because like, look at this, where we're proposing, it's what is essentially mostly commercial tourist. And so the idea is to like
I
maximize
get that,
density,
but
so.
some of this is market driven,
Yeah.
some of it, I don't know. I mean, it feels like we attempt to be prescriptive, and then we find that it, I mean, for instance, the mythical development off of Bull Road, and, you know, potentially could be zoned out.
That one is not necessarily proposed for mixed use. They haven't quite figured, that they want to have,
It's not about that. Let's
Yeah.
go to the model that has been presented. Okay, so you've got a retail core, you've got multifamily, you've got townhouse-like development, and you've got single family. It is a potentially desirable mixed-use neighborhood that creates the sort of feel that was lost in the development that occurred north of campus. My only point here is, by being prescriptive, that development would never occur in these new zones. Is that not accurate?
it's,
Because they're blank.
yeah, it's stating that they're kind of leaving out, not kind of, they're leaving out the single family and duplexes, but
And
kind of
and
promoting
cottage.
the higher density stuff with the townhouses.
No, again, I understand,
multifamily.
I understand.
So if you
I'm
guys
just
wanna
merely putting on the table
go a
that if
different
we're open for
direction.
discussion
Yeah.
here with council, that if we're creating new zones, my preference would be to see zones that are less prescriptive when we talk about residential uses than prescriptive. And then allow the market to evolve in a way that reflects the needs of the community. It could be a two-edged sword. We could end up with no multifamily, no mixed use. I mean, because theoretically you could have the same type of development that we're seeing currently. But it just, if this comes back to us, I'm merely suggesting that I would prefer to see those permitted uses, particularly around residential.
I would say that my take on that, and I wasn't participating in any of those conversations at the planning commission, but my assumption is that the single family and the duplex are just envisioned as detached standalone buildings, which aren't really suitable for that kind of thing. I think with the cottage, what the simple fact is, we, the city, and certainly the planning commission, has no experience with innovative cottage housing developments. They can't even visualize other than looking at a picture, maybe in another community. So to your point, there are probably designs out there that could be integrated into a true mixed use development. We just don't have any in Ellensburg to rely on.
Well,
right?
I mean, if I guess for me, David, what I'm looking at was the blue that just emerged there, which was significant property. Right, so if I were looking at, going back to our old, that didn't work, but if I were looking at a hub of a community, mixed use, retail, multifamily, pushing out townhouses, and then perhaps single family, and just as a, you know, it's not going to happen. But under the suggested code. So all I'm asking or suggesting, we're not voting on this. I'm simply bringing that to the conversation. I understand the rationale that we're pushing multifamily. Okay, I needed to, yeah, no, so we need to take a break. It's 6:55. So let's break for 5 minutes. We'll have to figure this out and come back. I
Yeah, we will.
apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that something else you just want